Welcome. I'm Craig Melvin in for Megyn Kelly. She's enjoying a day off with the family today. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Here to help me talk about what's making the rounds on this Monday, we've got NBC's Keir Simmons. He made the flight just for us. MSNBC political analyst, certainly the Maxwell, and MSNBC contributor Noah Rothman. Perhaps you heard that there was some history made on Saturday. Hours after the Senate narrowly confirmed him, Brett Kavanaugh officially took his place on the Supreme Court. And if you unplugged this weekend and missed it, you can catch the replay. Tonight in primetime, the White House hosting a ceremonial swearing in. And now both Democrats and Republicans are using the fight over Kavanaugh's nomination as a rallying cry ahead of the midterm elections. We're going to talk about all of that. But first, let's get the very latest from NBC's Kristen Welker.
This morning, Brett Kavanaugh is now Justice Kavanaugh, sworn in over the weekend in a private ceremony with his hand on a family Bible. As demonstrators on both sides descended on the nation's capital. Inside the Senate chamber Saturday, the vote for Kavanaugh interrupted again.
The Sergeant at Arms will restore.
And again.
Clerk will suspend.
Kavanaugh was confirmed 50-48, the slimmest margin in more than 100 years.
The nomination of Brett M. Kavanaugh of Maryland to be an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States is confirmed.
For President Trump, it is a monumental win.
I stand before you today on the heels of a tremendous victory for our nation, our people, and our beloved Constitution.
The victory capping a strong week for Mr. Trump, who struck a new trade deal with Mexico and Canada and saw the unemployment rate drop to 3.7%, its lowest in nearly 50 years, using all of it as leverage to energize Republicans in the upcoming midterms.
On November 6th, you will have the chance to stop the radical Democrats.
But Democrats are fired up and firing back.
I've said to the women who are justifiably angry but determined, and I said they should be just focused like a laser beam on the elections.
For moderate Republican Senator Susan Collins, who delivered the decisive yes vote, sticking with her party could have real consequences. She was pressed on 60 Minutes about Christine Blasey Ford's allegations of sexual assault against Kavanaugh, which he denies.
I believed that a sexual assault had happened to her. What I think she's mistaken about is who the perpetrator was. I do not believe her assailant was Brett Kavanaugh.
While North Dakota Democrat Heidi Heitkamp's no vote could cost her her seat next month, acknowledging voting yes would have been safer.
This isn't about politics. This is about a lifetime appointment on the Supreme Court.
All right, so let's talk about it. First of all, though, I want to poll the audience. Raise your hands if you were surprised that Brett Kavanaugh ended up being confirmed. Raise your hands if you were at all surprised. There's one woman in the back. Literally, one woman in the back. I didn't see behind me, but I don't think there's a lot of surprise back here. Were you surprised at all?
I wasn't surprised. Look, in 2016, Donald Trump won the election on a promise of remaking the Supreme Court and installing justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade. That was his promise. And so this is not a surprise. That doesn't mean that there weren't some important things that came out of this process, though. I think that Democrats showed that they're willing to fight, even if they're going to inevitably lose. And I also think that what was exposed through this process is, you know, for Susan Collins to say that she believes Dr. Ford, but she doesn't believe Brett Kavanaugh did it, it means that she doesn't believe Dr. Ford. Because Dr. Ford, under oath, said, he did it. I knew him. Our families knew each other. And so to believe her is to believe that Brett Kavanaugh did it. And so Susan Collins is a little on shaky ground with that argument. But this is not surprising in the least.
You don't think that both could be true?
I don't think both could be true. I think that Brett Kavanaugh perhaps may not remember. I don't know. But she was certain, and she was under oath, and she had nothing to gain by coming out under this scrutiny and telling such a traumatic truth. I mean, when you're opening up that box of trauma, you know, to quote Lady Gaga, that's a painful experience.
Noah, a lot has been made about how this issue, this confirmation battle is going to galvanize perhaps Democrats, but there's some talk that it could also galvanize Republicans as well.
Well, I've seen personally, and I'm not really sure what anecdotal evidence is relevant here, but a lot of Republicans do genuinely believe that an injustice has occurred both to Dr. Ford and to Judge Kavanaugh. I know a lot of women believe that what happened was a travesty of justice, that the abuses and indignities they have suffered are not to be believed either, if Dr. Ford's are not to be believed, regardless of when they happen. But according to what Senator Collins said, she could not see, not beyond a reasonable doubt, a criminal standard, not beyond a preponderance of evidence, a civil standard, but in the standard she made up for herself. Is this more likely than not to have happened? And even that threshold she could not cross in her own heart and her own mind. And we do not ruin lives based on intuition. We just don't.
You're over the pond. You're a correspondent based in London. How was all of this playing over there?
Well, you know, I just want to talk about the level of anger that has now poisoned the Supreme Court process and what I see from the outside about how unhappy and divided this country is, and talk to the people here and just say, you know, look, there's a lot of hypocrisy here. These politicians talk about the fact that they want the country to be less polarized, but in many ways they're benefiting from the polarization because they're trying to use this anger to get you to vote, and that's on both sides. And you know what? It's for the folks here in this audience and the people across America to bring that down a few levels. This is a great country. This is not the worst times in America. This country has had terrible times. The Second World War, the Civil War. We can just name time after time that was not as bad as this, and people need to start talking to each other and understanding each other. There's one other thing I want to say, which is there was a reference over the weekend to George Soros and to the accusations that he was sponsoring some of the demonstrations. There's not just hints of anti-Semitism in that. There is no place for anti-Semitism or racism in politics, and we must say that again and again and again any time that it turns up.
Amen. You know what? Let's take a turn here. I want to talk about something that's been big news here for the past 48 hours or so. Tay-Tay, Taylor Swift.
Yes.
One of the biggest names in music. She's decided to wade into politics, and I think we have the Instagram post. This is her Instagram post breaking her silence on politics, deciding to wade into the political waters by pledging her support. There's the Instagram post. She's pledging her support for 2 Democratic congressional candidates in Tennessee for midterms. Phil Bresden for Senate, Jim Cooper for the House. Zerlina, is there anyone who might be on the fence about a race in Tennessee who all of a sudden sees the Taylor Swift post and they're like, you know what? That's it.
Well, look,
Taylor's motivated.
Not necessarily someone on the fence, but definitely a young person that may or may not have thought about voting in the midterm elections, because young people don't generally vote in midterms and state level races. So I think it is important for her to wade in, and her reasoning was because everything's on the line in this upcoming election in terms of rights for people of color, for the LGBTQ community. Marriage equality was just made legal. It could be overturned like that. And so it's really, really important for people who have a particular platform like Taylor Swift. I mean, I never thought I would see Kanye West in a MAGA hat and Taylor Swift, endorsing Democrats. What a time to be alive. But I do think that, particularly as a young woman in a moment where women's rights are literally on the line, our lives and our bodies are on the line, Taylor Swift is an important voice to articulate that point.
It's a risky move, Noah. It's a risky move.
It might be. Yeah. I don't share my fellow conservatives' antipathy towards celebrities weighing in politics. These are people just like you and me. They have rights. They have opinions. They can talk about them as much as they want.
You can't vote for them, though. That's the crucial thing about celebrities weighing in politics, isn't it?
Unfortunately, no. I think I would vote for Taylor Swift, though.
Would you?
Yeah.
The president is a reality star, so the idea that celebrities can't wait in is no longer a
celebrity. From a conservative perspective, when a celebrity endorses a politician who says, for example, that they would have voted to confirm Judge Kavanaugh, I can't imagine conservatives would have much of a problem with that. Phil Bredesen is a pretty conservative Democrat, and that's the problem Democrats are going to have. If they take a majority, they're going to have a very diverse coalition with competing views. That's part of the problem with being a big tent party, is you have a lot of people that disagree with you.
Too heavy. Favorite Taylor Swift.
Being a big tent somehow is bad.
Favorite Taylor Swift song?
My kid, in 2014, my kid used to, I forget the video, it's the one where she's in the tutu.
Oh. Do you have a, shake it off.
There it is.
Shake it off.
Put my son
shake it off.
To sleep. Nothing else would.
Do you have a favorite?
My daughters like me too.
I'm not really a Taylor, I'm more a Beyonce, but I would say this. I'm all about the girl squad, so if Taylor Swift is going to be now a feminist and endorse Democrats, then she can join my squad.
All right.